Close your eyes and let the lamps dim, and I will take you somewhere damp and old, where morning comes in the colour of pewter, and the air tastes faintly of wood smoke and sheep's lanolin. You wake with a sneeze and the steady stare of a goat considering your immortal soul. It is not your goat. Here ownership is a rumour, and door latches are dreams. Creatures wander people borrow, and the world arrives uninvited. Straw crackles beneath you, actual straw, not the kindly metaphor from later centuries, and something that is not you rustles deeper in the bedding. You agree silently and respectfully to ignore each other until spring. Above, the thatch drips with patient inevitability. The hut has learned to weep without making a fuss, a tear at the eve, a slow, cold kiss on the neck, an occasional unceremonious plop into the ear. You clutch a blanket of rough wool that always smells faintly of rain, even on days without rain. And you accept that dryness is not a status here, but a brief rumour between storms. When the Romans left, they took their tiles and their tendency toward drainage. What they left behind was weather with opinions. Smoke floats sideways across the room, a lazy river of grey that refuses to find the door because the house has no chimney to teach it manners. The smoke comes from last night's hearth, coaxed low and sulking under ash, so the morning can find it still warm. It paints everything, the colour of memory beams, bowls the bellies of sleeping children, and it perfumes the air with yesterday's dinners and last week's gossip. Someone coughs, possibly the roof. Someone else snores like a small saw. Your tunic waits in a folded heap by the threshold, and it smells persuasively of goat. This time, the goat is yours and has opinions about both fabrics and boundaries. You put the tunic on anyway because modesty is warmer than pride, and the wind is a critic who does not applaud. Your hose are bands of cloth that dream wistfully of being shoes. You lace them as if you are binding a promise, the one where you tell yourself the day won't be as wet as it looks. The door is a plank with aspirations. It opens onto a world made entirely of mud in different moods. Contemplative mud, ambitious mud, rehearsing for a future career as a lake. Outside is colder, but somehow cleaner. The wind combs the fields with a rough wooden comb, and the sky hangs low enough to pat. A hen ticks by on purposeful feet, skeptical of your life choices. The village is already murmuring the gossip of pigs, the prayer of oxen, the throat clearing of a neighbour who has been trying to dislodge a single crumb of something since last Thursday. Your world is one room pretending to be many. There is the place where people sleep, the place where people sit, the place where the pot swings on an iron hook and believes in alchemy. There are baskets that leak straw like secrets, a loom that clicks when it is feeling industrious, and a table that lists gently to one side as if listening. Above the rafters, strips of meat and herbs hang to dry, and you wonder vaguely whether the meat is still meat or already memory. Your mother murmurs about planting times. Your father says something about someone else's sheep with the weariness of a man repeating a proverb older than the fence. It is not a rich house, but it is a stubborn one. The rushes on the floor were fresh 2 moons ago, and now speak quietly of last week's stew. The cup that is yours has a crack that knows your lips, and the spoon you share with your cousin tells stories in its dents. If a traveller from far-off lands were to list your possessions, they would be done before the smoke left the doorway. And yet there is that other ledger, the one kept by the heart, the warmth of bodies on winter nights, the sound of rain like a drum above the prayers at the hearth, the way a child's laugh makes the bad weather blush. Across the clearing, other huts blink awake like low stars. In each one is a life shaped by the same hands. Wind, water, earth, habit. The roofs hunch against the world, and the walls lean on one another like old friends with sore backs. A dog with more loyalty than fur performs a half-hearted patrol, pausing to regard you with the intimate disdain of someone who has seen you slip in the same puddle twice. A cart provides its own soundscape, complaining about its wheels with the cheerful pessimism of a village elder. Here everything is made of effort. Fires don't light themselves. Wood is a journey before it is a flame. Water is a walk with a yoke upon your shoulders, and the path to the well is guarded by a goose who believes in violence as pedagogy. Clothes take days to make and moments to tear. If a thing is simple, it is because it has been argued with for many winters by people who do not have time to argue any other way. Do not imagine, though, that this place is only misery with edges. There is a humour here that lives in the corners, soft and wry. It is in the way your aunt swears her nettle tea cures all known ills, including moral ones. It is in the way the boys rehearse sagas about yesterday's puddle, as if it were a dragon. It is in your uncle's daily lament about how breakfasts used to be better before the Romans left, which is impressive from someone born 30 years after they did. The laughter is small but frequent, like sparks from a stubborn log. Faith also lives here, complicated and abundant. On Sundays, you mouth Latin toward a wooden cross while staring respectfully at the priest's eyebrows. On Tuesdays, you tie a ribbon on the old hawthorn because your grandmother did and the lambs came sweet that year. You do not worry about contradictions. You keep company with saints and spirits the way a hedgerow keeps company with birds and thorns. The world is large enough for both, and the night is too long to choose only one kind of prayer. Listen now to the roof. It is a musician with exactly 2 notes tap and drop, and it plays them honestly. Listen to the walls as they creak out their old story of being trees once, and the floor as it says nothing at all because it is tired of being stepped on. The house is not a castle, not a fortress, but it shields you from the wind's worst opinions. You have learned how to bank a fire so it sleeps and does not die, and how to chide a spark into courage when dawn needs it. Beyond the hedges, the fields are the true lord of the village, and they rule without speeches. The soil is moody, sometimes generous, sometimes sulking, sometimes taking back what it gave because the moon changed its mind. You know its tempers by the way the crows behave, and by the dream that comes before rain, where everyone you've ever met appears carrying buckets. Tools rest against the byre like old soldiers, a hoe with a limp, a rake that loves arguments, a spade that remembers the taste of every winter. There is danger here, yes, but it has the decency to be honest. Cold is cold. It doesn't pretend to be anything else. Hunger does not arrive disguised. You can count its steps. Blisters make their own sermons and splinters preach repentance. You live by a strict liturgy of practicalities. Keep the ember alive, mind the door in the wind dry, the boots before the moon climbs. Never turn your back on a clever pig. The commandments are few and enforce themselves. And yet, in the quiet between chores, the world sometimes softens. A shaft of watery light slips through thatch and finds dust turning slowly like snow caught in a daydream. A child's hand sticky with something that was once an apple reaches for yours without agenda. Your breath makes small clouds in the morning air, and for a moment you feel you are visible to yourself. This is not comfort as the future will name it, but it is kin to comfort and speaks the same language. Now the village stirs properly. A neighbour clears his throat and the sound travels like a summons. Somewhere a cow announces herself with theological conviction. The day begins not with a bell, but with a conspiracy of ordinary noises, heaves, scrapes, sighs, and the ragged choir of people deciding to try again. You tie your belt off of the goat, a look that confesses nothing, and step into the mud with the determination of a pilgrim and the balance of a beginner. We will not hurry this morning. The dark ages are not a place you rush through. They are a weather you learn to stand in. You will learn the weight of your shovel, the grammar of your neighbour's complaints, the precise diplomacy required to pass a goose unbitten. You will learn that survival here is not a miracle, but an art composed of small daily brushstrokes so constant that one day when you least expect it, you will look up and see a painting where a struggle used to be. And as the wind noses your cheek and the ash in the hearth blushes back into flame, remember this in a world that has forgotten what comfort is spelled like. Endurance becomes a kind of music. It hums in the seams of your tunic, in the knots of the gate, in the way your hands know the day before your head does. The hut is small and the sky is large, but you stand exactly where both agree to meet. The day is wet. You are ready anyway. The morning in Dark Age, Britain does not greet you with the golden promise of bread and butter. It greets you with a bubbling pot that looks as though it has opinions about your survival. Breakfast here is not a meal, not really. It is a negotiation with hunger, a truce signed with grey porridge and thin hope. You shuffle to the hearth where the cooking pit smoulders. The pot sits tilted like a suspicious neighbour bubbling a mixture the family calls gruel. It is a word with no melody, a syllable that tastes like resignation. You hope it is barley, perhaps oats if fortune has been kind. You fear it is moss again. Once when food ran short, someone gathered what looked like herbs and what tasted like bark. The healer called it forest porridge. You called it 3 days of regret. A wooden ladle warped by many winters scoops out the grey offering. Into your bowl, it goes your bowl, which you know by its single crack running down the side like a scar. You blow on the steam, though it smells not of nourishment, but of hot mud. A fly lands on the surface and seems pleased to have been invited. You blow harder. The fly refuses to leave. At last you shrug. It is extra protein, and in this world, that counts as generosity. Beside you, your cousin gnaws on a root as if avenging himself on it. He chews loudly the rhythm of someone who has mistaken determination for flavour. You avoid eye contact. To look too long is to share his sorrow, and sorrow is already common as mud. Your uncle, stirring the pot with unnecessary authority, sighs that breakfasts were better when the Romans still kept order. He was born decades after their departure, but nostalgia needs no facts. You nod anyway, spoon raised like a pledge of loyalty. What is missing, of course, is everything you dream of in another world. There is no coffee, no tea, no morning bread slathered with butter. The only liquid to pass for a drink is a weak herbal brew your aunt insists keeps the humours balanced. It tastes of twigs and disappointment, but you drink it because hydration is a sermon repeated by every elder who has lived past 40. And here past 40 is considered a respectable rebellion against nature. Breakfast is also a time for stories spoken low over bowls of steaming gruel. Someone mutters about a fox that raided the hens last night. Another speaks of a dream in which the moon bled red, which everyone agrees is probably a warning, though no one agrees about what. The children poke at their bowls and ask whether Vikings eat porridge too, a question that sends a ripple of unease around the hut. Your father hushes them. The morning is too early for fear. Occasionally, fortune smiles in the form of flavour. An onion chopped fine may swim in the pot like a guest of honour. If someone traded wisely at the last market, perhaps dried herbs flicker through the grey surface, turning ordinary gruel into something almost celebratory. Once long ago, your grandmother claimed she ate a breakfast flavoured with honey. She speaks of it with the reverence others reserve for miracles. The children listen wide-eyed as though she is describing heaven itself. There are traditions too forgotten by the world beyond your fields, but still alive here. On feast days, the first spoonful of porridge is placed outside the hut as an offering to unseen watchers, the ancestors perhaps, or the spirits of the soil. Your mother still performs this ritual quietly, pressing the bowl against the cold earth before the chickens find it. She says it keeps the family safe, and though the priest would scold her, you notice she never forgets. The rooster outside is not a rooster at all, but a neighbour with a cough that sounds like prophecy. He clears his throat and the sound folds into the rhythm of the morning. Chickens peck too close to human feet, a dog sulks by the door, and the thin sun pulls itself over the horizon with reluctance. You eat slowly, not because you savour the flavour, but because making the bowl last is a game everyone learns to play. At the end, you are not full. You are simply less empty, which is the most generous definition of breakfast in this land. Hunger is not conquered, only postponed. You place the cracked bowl aside, wipe your hands on your tunic, and glance at the pot to see if more remains. It does not. The fire sighs, sending a puff of smoke into your eyes. Somewhere deep in the village, the bell of the monastery clangs faintly, marking a time you do not care to count. To you, morning is not measured in hours, but in how many spoonfuls it takes before you can face the day. Today it took 7. Tomorrow, it may take less. Time, after all, is not the master here. Hunger is. And so breakfast ends not with satisfaction, but with survival. You rise from the log where you sat, stomach only partly appeased, spirit only partly discouraged, and step into the mud again. The chores await as they always do, as they always will. In this age, a meal is never the beginning of comfort. It is only the beginning of work. The morning sun, pale as watered milk, has barely climbed above the hedgerows when your mother calls your name. The bowl of gruel has hardly settled in your stomach before you are summoned to the true labour of the day, the noble, uncelebrated craft of dung. Behind the hut, the animal pens wait. Goats, pigs, and one suspiciously vengeful sheep shift restlessly in the damp straw. They greet you not with affection, but with the kind of curiosity predators reserve for prey. There, steaming in the chill air, lies your quarry, a heap of yesterday's offerings, a mountain in miniature smelling of both doom and possibility. You lift your shovel splintered and heavy, more a trial than a tool. To call it wood is generous. It is a warped plank that remembers trees only faintly. But here, this is Excalibur. This is destiny. Each scoop is an act of will. Each heave a reminder that survival has no dignity without sweat. You breathe shallowly, balancing between consciousness and nausea, the delicate art of not fainting into your work. The pigs watch with a look that can only be called contempt. The goats are amused eyes bright with mockery. A chicken bold and officious follows your every move as though grading your technique. Once when you faltered, it pecked the shovel as if to say, again, but properly. You learn to endure the silent judgments of beasts, for they will never clap, but always criticize. The dung goes onto a sled. Not a cartwheel's drown in mud this thick. The sled drags behind you like a reluctant child bumping over stones, sighing in protest. You haul it to the compost heap, a mound so vast it could pass for a sleeping dragon. Steam curls from its flanks, warm and unsettling, smelling of life broken down into the memory of itself. You toss your load atop the summit, and the heap sighs like an old man disturbed from his nap. And here is the secret: dung is not waste, not in this world. It is the foundation of everything. It fuels the hearth when wood grows scarce, pressed into patties that burn slow and stubborn. It fattens the soil, coaxing barley from reluctant earth. It even patches floors mixed with straw into a paste that dries hard, sealing out drafts. Dung is survival disguised as filth, the alchemy of rot transformed into life. Your uncle once traded a sack of dried cow dung for half a duck. He called it the finest bargain of his career. The village elder remembers times of famine when dung kept fires burning while snow tried to starve the fields. And the healer, half herbalist, half mystic, insists that certain smokes from dried droppings keep away fevers, though whether this is medicine or theatre, no one dares ask aloud. There are stories too woven into this work. Children whisper of spirits that dwell in the compost heap, guardians of fertility who punish those who mock their gifts. Farmers mutter that each pile carries the soul of the herd, and that to waste it is to anger the ancestors. On feast days, some families even sprinkle a token handful on the field's edge, an offering to the silent gods of growth. These tales may be superstition, but in a land where hunger crouches at every door, reverence is cheap and prudence cheaper still. The work is endless, but the rhythm numbs you into acceptance. Scoop, heave, drag, dump. The morning grows older, the sun climbing reluctantly through the mist, and your arms ache with the repetition of necessity. Sweat beads along your brow despite the chill. The earth beneath your feet softens to slurry, and you slip, once landing knee-deep in what you meant to discard. The chicken clucks triumphantly, awarding you no points. Yet in this mire lies strange pride. To shovel dung is to claim usefulness, to make yourself part of the great cycle where waste becomes warmth, filth becomes food. Every heap carted away is a small act of rebellion against hunger, a promise that winter will not have the last word. When you pile the steaming mass high and see it smoking like incense to unseen powers, you almost understand why elders bow their heads when passing. You pause at last, resting on your shovel, the handle worn smooth by hands that were calloused before yours. The pigs grunt, the goats chew cud, the sheep plots its next ambush. Your tunic is stained beyond recognition, a tapestry of crimes against hygiene, but your task is done for now. You wipe your hands on the fabric anyway, for what more can it suffer? The sun, faint but insistent, has climbed higher. The village hums with labour, others cutting wood, fetching water, patching roofs. Each task smells less dramatic than yours, yet none are more essential. You straighten your back, feeling both smaller and stronger. Around you, the air is thick with the perfume of survival, pungent and unforgettable. You have begun your day with dung, and in this world that is not shame, it is honour disguised as drudgery. For though the work is foul, it is also sacred, the labour that binds hut to hearthfield to stomach life to tomorrow. In dark age, Britain, the shovel is your staff, the compost heap your altar, and the steaming air your incense. And so, with filth on your boots and smoke in your hair, you walk back toward the hut shovel. Across your shoulder, like a knight bearing his sword. The chicken follows, still unimpressed but loyal. Survival smells like this, looks like this, works like this. You breathe deeply, and though the air is rank, it fills your chest with purpose. The sacred art of dung has been performed. The day can now continue. In dark age, Britain, the hours are not numbered, the days are not measured, and the years slip past without calendars to pin them down. Time here is not a steady march, but a fog, a rhythm felt more in the bones than read on parchment. You know, it is morning because the smoke in the hut grows restless and the rooster-shaped cough of your neighbour breaks the silence. You know it is evening when the goats stop glaring and the fire begins to sulk low in the ash. Beyond that time is a matter of memory and guesswork. Ask 3 people the year and you will hear 3 different answers. Old Tilda swears it is still Roman times, though she cannot name which emperor reigns. The blacksmith insists it is the century of saints, while your cousin declares it is the year of the angry goose, which to be fair was unforgettable. The monastery perched on a hill a day's walk away claims authority in such matters. Their monks count the years by the births of kings and the rulings of distant popes. But to you, it is meaningless arithmetic. The parchment they scratch with quills might as well be spells. The sun and the seasons are your only clocks. Winter bites, spring softens, summer sulks and then burns out, and autumn sighs heavily over every field. Planting time is the real new year. The village gathers in damp earth, thrusting seeds into soil, while muttering prayers to both Christ and the clouds. Each furrow is a petition, each raindrop an omen. And when the shoots rise green, it feels less like biology and more like a miracle repeated for your sake. Children mark time differently. They count how many snowfalls since the last litter of piglets, how many floods since the ox cart tipped into the ford, how many scars on their knees since midsummer. They speak in seasons of laughter and bruises, not in numbered years. To them, the past is only before the fire or after the storm, and the future is simply another round of the same. The elders cling to sagas and reckonings. They speak of 3 winters after the great sickness or 2 famines before the roof fell. Their memories are the village's calendar, imperfect but cherished. Around the fire at night, they will remind you of events you never lived, anchoring your life to a chain of stories. A Viking raid that never reached your shore, a frost that killed half the cattle, a star that fell and burned. Like judgment, each becomes a landmark on the road of time, more solid than numbers. Yet there are those who attempt precision. Once you asked a monk what year it was, and he rewarded your curiosity with a lecture on papal decrees, solar cycles, and the mysteries of Easter's shifting date. His words tangled into knots, and you backed away before he decided to baptize your goat again. Still, his insistence lingers that somewhere beyond your hut and your mud, there exists a grand pattern of days that kings and priests alone can see. The sky too keeps its own account. You learn to read omens in the way clouds stretch across the horizon, in the restless movements of cattle before a storm, in the sharp ache of your joints that promises frost. The moon waxes and wanes like a lantern carried by unseen hands. Its phases dictate when fishermen cast their nets, when women whisper of fertility, when the healer insists on gathering her herbs. Time is celestial, but its face is hidden, glimpsed only through signs. The church tries to anchor it. Bells toll to summon you to Mass, to mark the feasts of saints, to demand fasting or celebration. But even those holy days blur together in memory. Was the last feast of St. Cuthbert when the barley failed? Or when the wolves came too close to the village? Did Easter bring a lamb that year, or only salted fish? Faith builds a scaffold around the days, but the fog of time still seeps through every crack. And so you live in a present that stretches like taffy, sometimes snapping with sudden disasters, sometimes sagging into endless sameness. To ask when is to be met with shrugs and stories. You are not 15, you are old enough to help, young enough to complain. Your mother guesses at years the way she guesses at weather. Your grandmother insists you were born during the big fire, but no one agrees which fire she means. This looseness is not despair, it is freedom of a strange sort. Without calendars, you are not trapped by schedules. You sleep when the dark commands you work, when the sun insists, and you measure your worth not in birthdays, but in the weight of harvests and the number of winters survived. Every grey morning you rise is proof enough that time has chosen to keep you at least for now. In Dark Age, Britain time is not a tyrant counting hours. It is a mist that wraps around your life, sometimes thinning, sometimes thickening, but always flowing. You live not in dates, but in cycles, not in years, but in seasons, not in numbers, but in stories. The Romans may have taken their calendars, but they left behind something older, something harder to break the rhythm of survival, beating quietly beneath every dawn. You lift your shovel again, aware that chores await, and think it may be the year 493 or 526, or the age of heroes, or perhaps only the morning after rain. And really, that is enough. Time here belongs to the mud and the memory of those who endure it. On Sunday, you rise earlier than usual, though your body protests. The priest's bell echoes faintly through the fog, calling the village to gather. You shuffle toward the small wooden church, a structure that leans slightly as though tired of listening to prayers. Inside, a rough wooden cross watches over benches that creak more loudly than the congregation. The priest intones Latin, his voice solemn, his words opaque. You nod along, mouthing sounds you do not understand. To nod is safer than to look confused. When the sermon ends, the villagers spill out into the daylight, faces pale with piety, hands sticky with devotion. Yet even as you bow to the cross, you feel the tug of other loyalties. Beyond the edge of the fields, the ancient oak waits its roots like knotted fists, its bark marked by strange growths that resemble faces. Some say the tree carries the soul of a long-dead matriarch. Others whisper it listens silently, judging each season. Chickens avoid it, and once when your brother tried to cut a branch for firewood, he fell sick with boils. Coincidence, perhaps, but no one risked it again. So, at dusk, when no priest is watching you tie a ribbon of wool to its lowest branch, it flutters in the evening breeze, an unspoken offering. You whisper a small request that the roof will hold this winter, that the goats will give milk. Is it superstition? Is it faith? You do not ask. In your world, belief is not a matter of choosing, but of layering like straw on a roof. Christ above spirits beneath, each working together to keep out the rain. The river too demands its share of reverence. On certain days, fishing is forbidden. The spirit rests, the old folks say. Once a stubborn neighbour ignored the rule and cast his net anyway. What he pulled up was no fish, but a frog with teeth. The creature snapped at him, calling his name, or so he swore. He left the village not long after, muttering of curses and river eyes. Since then, no one questions the ban. Better to be hungry than haunted. The healer Maywin embodies this strange blend of worlds. She crosses herself before tending a wound, yet she smears mud and hangs chicken bones over the sickbed. She chants prayers to saints you've never heard of while muttering appeals to the moon when she thinks no one listens. She insists this is Christian healing, though it smells of goat and despair. Still, people come to her, for the priest gives sermons but no salves. On nights of the harvest moon, the entire village gathers in the fields. The priest is invited, yes, but he stands stiffly at the edge, pretending not to notice when women mutter about omens in the sky. Children gasp as the round face of the moon swells with eerie light. Men nod silently, as if sharing knowledge too old for words. You stand among them, shivering, not entirely from the cold. The air feels thick, expectant, as though the fields themselves are listening. No one denies Christ here. His name is spoken, his symbol carved into door lintels, his cross kissed before sleep. But alongside him walk other presences, the moss that always grows on the north side of trees, the raven that glints with suspicion, the silence that falls when someone dares speak Woden's name after dark. Saints and spirits share the same soil, neither fully banished, neither fully worshipped. You hedge your bets because survival demands it. The villagers call this being thorough. You call it being safe. If Christ guards your soul, perhaps the oak guards your roof. If saints protect your children, perhaps the river ensures they live long enough to grow. Faith is not a line you draw, it is a net you weave. Every knot holds another hope, another plea, another whispered bargain with powers you barely understand. And so when night falls, you kneel beside your pallet and murmur a prayer to the cross hanging on the wall. When you rise, you place a crust of bread on the window ledge for the household spirits. Both prayers are sincere. Both are necessary. This is not contradiction, it is harmony, the old world and the new walking side by side through the mud. For in Dark Age, Britain's salvation may belong to the church, but survival belongs to the spirits of the earth. And you caught between them, honour both. The wind carries more than rain across the marshes. It carries rumours heavy as storm clouds, sharp as axe blades. The Northmen are near. Someone whispers at the well, glancing over their shoulder. They've burned a village by the coast. Another mutters in the tavern's smoke. The words spread faster than fire on dry thatch, leaping from ear to ear, turning fear into certainty. You have never seen a Viking with your own eyes, yet you know their shape. Children carve them in the mud. Tall men with braids, eyes like wolves and axes that can split a man in half with one blow. Old Tilda swears she once saw a ship glide silently along the river at dusk, its carved dragon head shimmering with menace. Others say she sees many things, saints' ghosts, and twice the Virgin Mary. So who can be sure? Still, no one laughs when she tells it. At night, you hear the stories by the hearth. They come in longboats' oars, striking the sea. Like thunder, your uncle says, voice low, so the children lean in closer. They wear iron shirts harder than any farmer's hoe, and their helmets gleam in firelight. A child asks, do they wear horns? The uncle frowns. Only fools do. Real Vikings don't need horns to be feared. You shiver, for somehow that seems worse. The dread is not only of men, but of silence. A sudden hush in the woods, the absence of birdsong, the way dogs prick their ears toward nothing, these become omens. You imagine sails appearing like ghosts on the horizon, red as blood or striped like storm clouds. You imagine the thud of boots on earth, the crash of doors, the scream of neighbours dragged from their huts. You do not need to see it. The fear is enough. Some villagers tell tales of bargains. Leave ale at the riverbank, and perhaps the raiders will pass you by. Bury silver beneath the hearth, and perhaps they will not find it. Others speak of betrayal of lords who pay the Northmen to plunder rivals instead. You wonder if your own village could be so cursed where the coin might weigh more than kin. In Dark Age, Britain trust is as fragile as a roof in storm. Children are warned to obey, or else the Vikings will take you. Mothers hush babies with lullabies that slip into threats. Even the priest admits in his sermons that raiders are God's punishment for sinful lives, though he does not specify which sins. Perhaps yours you think uneasily, perhaps everyone's, and yet fascination walks beside fear. The blacksmith mutters that their blades are sharper than any in the land, forged with secrets the English cannot match. A shepherd envies their ships carved to skim the waves like swallows. Your cousin, reckless and foolish, says he would rather join them than fight them. Better to raid than be raided, he grins until your mother cuffs him sharply. The nights stretch long with unease. Each crack of the hut's timber, each howl of wind through the eaves might be a war cry. The geese, ever vigilant, honk at shadows, and you bless them as the best guards your village owns. When the dogs bark into darkness, hearts leap into throats. More than once, men have risen with spears, only to find it was foxes or nothing at all. And then one dawn smoke is seen on the horizon. Not the smoke of hearths, but of burning. The air tightens. Men gather with what weapons they can, pitchforks, axes, a sword rusted since your grandfather's day. Women hide children under straw, whispering prayers to saints and spirits alike. The church bell tolls not for worship, but for warning. The smoke drifts closer. The fear sharpens. But the raiders never arrive. Perhaps they passed along the coast. Perhaps another village bore the storm. Still, the dread remains lingering like ash on the wind. You know they will come again, if not today, then another day. The whisper of Vikings is never silent for long. And so you live between breath and blade, half in peace, half in waiting. Your days are spent with dung and ploughs, but your nights are haunted by sails you cannot see. In Dark Age, Britain's survival means not only enduring hunger and cold, but bracing for the thunder of oars that may never land, yet always might. When the porridge turns sour and the smoke coughs too harshly, when the bones ache in ways no shovel can explain, the village turns to Maewyn the healer. She is older than the oak tree, or so the children claim, with hands like roots and eyes that notice too much. Her hut smells of dried herb smoke and a dozen secrets steeped in jars. She begins with questions the priest would call improper. When did the cough begin? What colour is the phlegm? What dreams came to you last night? To Maewyn, illness is not only in the body, but in the air, the soil, the stars, and the stubbornness of goats. She talks of humours, the black bile, yellow bile, blood and phlegm that slosh about inside you like moody neighbours. When they quarrel, you suffer. When they balance, you thrive. For fevers, she brews teas of willow bark, tasting bitter enough to frighten the sickness away. For swelling, she binds poultices of nettle and clay, muttering charms, half in Latin, half in something older. For wounds, she sprinkles salt into cuts, a sting so fierce it makes grown men howl louder than the gash itself. She tells them to be grateful. The salt drives out evil as much as rot. Sometimes her cures wander into stranger territory. A necklace of wolf's teeth against night terrors. A pouch of dried toad skins to hang above the bed for fertility. Once she buried a villager's boots at the crossroads to banish the sickness clinging to his chest. When he recovered, she nodded wisely, as though she had argued with death and won. When he died later that winter, she said simply, "The boots bought him time." Leeches, too, make their appearance, slick, wriggling physicians of the marsh. Maewyn places them carefully as though arranging jewels and watches them swell with blood until they drop away sated. Balance restored, she declares, wiping her hands on her apron. Some villagers whisper it is nonsense. Yet when sickness gnaws at them, they shuffle to her door anyway, muttering apologies to saints as they cross her threshold. Children fear her hut. They say strange lights glow within, that her black cat speaks in dreams, that she keeps a raven who knows the names of the dead. When smoke curls from her chimney, they hold their breath and run past, certain that one whiff could change them into frogs. But mothers still go to her for birthing pains, and farmers for wounds that will not close. Fear bends to need, and need is constant. The priest tolerates her uneasily. He calls her remedies folk nonsense, though, when he himself limped with gout, it was Maewyn's compressors that let him climb the altar steps again. He mutters louder about the devil's influence now, but no one forgets the way he winced in gratitude as she tied the bandage. There are failures, of course. Some fevers burn through every charm and herb. Some coughs grow into rattling farewells. Then Maewyn does not pretend. She sits beside the pallet, rubbing the dying one's hands with oils, whispering words not quite prayer, not quite lullaby. When the breath leaves at last, she closes the eyes with a gentleness that makes even grief pause. Her reputation is uneven, half miracle worker, half charlatan, but indispensable all the same. You may mock her charms in daylight, but when the night presses heavy on your chest, you remember the bitter taste of her willow tea and the way her wrinkled hand steadied yours. In Dark Age, Britain health is a fragile guest always threatening to leave. And so the healer holds her place, one foot in faith, one in superstition, both planted firmly in survival. She is proof that medicine is not only knowledge, but courage spoken in whispers and measured in herbs. When you leave her hut clutching a pouch of something that smells of marsh water and ash, you are not certain it will cure you. But you are certain she believes it will. And sometimes belief is the strongest medicine you have. Water is everywhere in your world, dripping through thatch, soaking fields, turning paths into mud. But almost never where you would want it most, in a clean hot basin. Bathing as you imagine it belongs more to saints in manuscripts and rumours of far-off lands than to your daily life. Here in the village, water is for drinking, cooking, and keeping beasts alive. To pour it over your body, simply for comfort, seems an extravagance too great for mortals. Still, washing happens in fits and starts, more ritual than routine. In summer, when the river runs clear, children are dunked squealing into its chill embrace. Mothers scrub their heads until they cough up half the stream, then haul them out shivering clean enough to risk a smile. In winter, however, such play is impossible. To bathe then is to invite death. Better to smell like smoke and goat than to freeze stiff as an icicle. Soap exists, though calling it that is generous. It is made from ash and fat, a greyish lump that feels like stone and smells faintly of firewood. Rubbed on the skin, it leaves scratches and suds that resemble defeat more than cleanliness. Yet on feast days, families bring out these treasured lumps, scrubbing faces, necks and hands until red as apples. The rest of the body is left to imagination. There are whispers of nobles who keep wooden tubs filled with warm water by servants who must carry endless buckets from the well. They scent the water with herbs, lavender, mint, sometimes even roses. The villagers mutter this is wasteful, sinful, decadent. But secretly, everyone dreams of sinking into such warmth, closing their eyes and forgetting mud for an hour. Monks bathe more often, though, not without suspicion. Once a week in silence, they slip into cold stone baths, regarding it not as pleasure, but as discipline. To them, scrubbing the body purifies the soul, though most villagers suspect they simply enjoy the excuse to stop copying texts for a while. Rumour says some monasteries even heat their water a detail so luxurious it sounds like myth. Among common folk, bathing can seem dangerous. Old wives warn that too much washing weakens the body, stripping away the natural oils that guard against sickness. Dirt keeps the devil out, says your grandmother, firmly refusing to wash more than her hands before supper. And indeed, many who bathe in the river emerge with coughs that last all winter. Yet there are moments when cleanliness is unavoidable. A bride on the eve of her wedding must be scrubbed until she shines like new wood. A newborn, slippery and wailing, is bathed in warmed water mixed with herbs. A blessing for lungs and limbs. And before burial, the dead are carefully washed, their skin wiped clean of mud, their hair combed smooth as though they are being prepared for a feast in the otherworld. You too have known the rare full washing. It came once during midsummer when the heat clung to your skin like smoke. You plunged into the pond, the shock stealing your breath, the water closing over your head like a second sky. For a moment, you felt lighter, freer, as if the mud of the world had been peeled away. Then you climbed out, shivering only to be coated again in dust and sweat before nightfall. Cleanliness, it seems, is always temporary. So you make peace with dirt. You carry the scent of smoke in your hair, the tang of sweat on your tunic, the stubborn black beneath your nails. And when visitors wrinkle their noses, you shrug. This is the perfume of survival. In Dark Age, Britain bathing is not routine. It is ritual, rare and symbolic. You wash, not to be fresh, but to honour life's thresholds, birth, marriage, death, and the occasional feast. For the rest of the days you live as the earth itself does, weathered, worn, and layered with the honest dust of time. Mud clings to the hems of peasants, but sometimes fortune lifts a man or woman just high enough that the mud stains fewer of their days. You have risen a little, no longer counted among the nameless many. You are now something else, a minor noble cousin to someone important holder of land enough to matter. It is not grandeur, but it is a step above survival. Your home reflects this shift. Gone is the cramped, smoky hut. In its place stands a hall long and draughty, its roof high enough to impress visitors and cold enough to remind you that status does not guarantee warmth. The floor is still dirt, but strewn with rushes to mask the smell, and sometimes you scatter herbs among them. Lavender if you can afford it, mint, if not stale barley when the steward gets it wrong. To peasants, this looks like splendour. To you, it is simply the daily attempt to keep stench at bay. Meals too have changed. Where once you gnawed coarse bread and thin porridge, now barley stew comes with herbs, with pork on feast days, and with the occasional game bird caught in your lord's woods, provided no one asks too many questions. You eat from wooden platters, drink from pewter mugs, and use spoons carved with care rather than scavenged from the ashes. This is progress, though the taste of smoke still lingers in every bite. You own 2 tunics now, a luxury so grand it feels almost sinful. One is of rough wool for daily use, the other is of finer weave dyed a dull red that proclaims to all that you are no longer common. Yet it itches, and though peasants admire it with envy, you secretly long for the comfort of your old rags. Nobility, you discover, is measured not in ease, but in obligation. Servants now toil where once your own back bent. They haul water, chop wood, and feed the pigs. Their labour spares you the mud, yet it also marks the distance between you. They avert their eyes when you pass bow stiffly and whisper when your back is turned. To peasants, you are lordly. To greater nobles, you are barely more than them. It is a precarious perch, and you feel it every time you sit at the high end of the table pretending the splinters in your bench are thrones. Feasts are grander too. You host neighbours' minor lords and sometimes a passing bishop. Minstrels strum, servants pour wine, and dancers whirl across the rushes. Yet beneath the laughter lies unease. Poisoning is a whisper away. A cousin's dagger could find your ribs before the mead is finished. You dine with caution, tasting every dish as though it might be your last, smiling while suspicion gnaws at your gut. Still, you enjoy moments of splendour. A tapestry, crude but bright, hangs on your wall. A silver cup, gifted by a grateful guest, gleams in the firelight. And when villagers bow as you ride past on a sturdy horse, you feel the weight of power settle comfortably, if only for a moment. You are no longer nameless. You are someone. Yet the smell remains. Beneath the herbs beyond the feasts, despite the second tunic, your world still stinks of smoke, sweat, and damp wool. Nobility, it turns out, cannot scrub away the scent of the age itself. And so you live between worlds. To peasants, you are impossibly grand. To lords, you are amusingly small. But to yourself, you are something rarer, a survivor who has climbed higher than most, whose hall, however drafty, stands as proof that mud does not always win. In Dark Age, Britain nobility is not about comfort. It is about recognition. And though the rushes rot beneath your feet and the stew tastes faintly of smoke, you know you have risen. That in itself is triumph. The hall is warmer now, and the rushes beneath your feet are sprinkled with herbs. Yet one truth remains unchanged: you cannot read. The letters that fill the priest's scrolls, the marks that monks scratch into parchment, look like chicken tracks marching in endless rows. They speak of God, of kings of worlds unseen, but to you they are silence untouchable as stars. In Dark Age, Britain learning is rare, a jewel guarded by stone walls and tonsured heads. Monks and nuns dwell in monasteries where cold fingers ink Latin words by flickering lamplight, binding thoughts in calfskin. They whisper of Cicero, of Aristotle, of Scripture, while the rest of the world fumbles in the mud. Knowledge belongs to them, cloistered and preserved. To peasants and minor nobles alike, learning is as distant as Constantinople itself. Yet you are not ignorant. Your wisdom is written in seasons, not scrolls. You know the way the clouds gather before snow, the taste of river water when it turns sour, the sound of a cow ready to calve. You can trade with a man missing half his teeth and walk away with more than you gave. You can mend a thatch roof so it leaks less, skin a rabbit with patience, or tell whether a herb heals or kills. These are your letters and numbers scratched into the soil rather than ink. Sometimes wandering monks arrive in the village, their hands stained black from ink, their eyes weary from study. They preach, they scold, they offer blessings in Latin. You nod solemnly, though you do not understand. Yet when one of them sketches a cross in the dirt, you feel the weight of it. Perhaps knowledge is not only in books. Perhaps it is also in symbols, in stories, in the simple things that carry meaning beyond words. Children play in the mud, tracing their own crooked lines with sticks. Some imitate the monks, drawing loops and crosses, chanting nonsense syllables with conviction. Perhaps one of them will be sent to a monastery, will learn to read the strange tracks and bring back secrets written by distant hands. For now, though, most will remain like you, wise in ways parchment cannot record. The village elder insists he remembers the old tales passed from his grandmother and her grandmother before her. He claims the words are as true as Scripture, though they never touched ink. Around the hearth he speaks of kings who fought giants of trees, that whispered secrets of rivers that remembered blood. You listen not because you believe every word, but because the rhythm feels like knowledge, an inheritance that binds you to those before. And yet, there is longing. To see what the monks see, to understand the words carved in stone crosses, or written in the margins of books, that is a hunger you cannot quite name. You wonder if learning might be a key, a way to glimpse a larger world beyond fields and feasts. Perhaps one day your children will hold such keys if the times are kind. For now, you hold your own kind of literacy, the tongue of survival, the alphabet of earth and sky. You cannot write your name, but the land knows your footprints. You cannot recite Latin, but you can call the cows home at dusk and they answer. In this age, that is enough. In Dark Age, Britain learning is rare, but wisdom is everywhere in the soil in the seasons, in the whispered stories carried by firelight. You may not hold parchment in your hands, but you hold life itself. And that too is a kind of book. When the sun dips low and shadows stretch long across the fields, the village gathers. Not in taverns, they are too few too far, but around the central fire, the great glowing heart of your world. The hearth is not just warmth, it is theatre, chapel, council and stage. Here beneath smoke-stained rafters, stories live. The flames crackle, throwing sparks that leap like dancers, and one voice begins. Perhaps it is the elder whose back bends, but whose memory still climbs mountains. He speaks of kings who drew swords from stones of saints, who banished serpents of forests that whisper secrets if you dare to listen. Children lean forward, eyes wide, their faces painted gold by firelight. Adults nod, murmuring corrections, for every tale has many versions, and each teller insists theirs is true. Laughter follows, sometimes at the story, sometimes at the storyteller. Gossip seeps in like smoke winding between the legends. Did you see how the blacksmith's wife lingered by the baker's stall? Someone whispers, and the tale of a queen's betrayal finds new life in local scandal. In this world, myth and rumour share the same bench, blurring together until both feel equally real. Minstrels wander through now and then, carrying battered harps or fiddles carved from bone. Their songs speak of battles far away, of crusades no one here has seen, of cities gleaming by the sea. The notes tremble through the smoky hall, strange and alluring, yet half lost against the roar of the fire. Villagers clap, not always in rhythm, but in solidarity. For rhythm is survival, and survival is worth applauding. Dancing breaks out when ale flows. Not elegant courtly steps, but stomping, flailing, joyous movement that shakes the rushes underfoot. Men whirl until they stumble, women laugh until their cheeks ache. Children squeal as they try to copy. It is messy, sweaty, entirely human, and it binds the village together tighter than any oath. Sometimes contests spice the night. Riddles are exchanged, riddles so tangled they sound like incantations. One man wagers he can drink more ale than another. They try and both collapse long before dawn. Arm wrestling erupts sometimes, with a chicken perched indignantly on the table as referee. These contests are remembered long after, recited like epics. The night Wulfstan drank 3 horns of mead, the time Eda bested a shepherd at riddles, the evening when the goose declared itself victor. Not all is laughter. There are hushed moments too, when silence falls heavy and someone speaks of omens, the ravens circling the fields. The strange sickness in the cows, the dream of fire that came thrice in a row. Heads bow, prayers are whispered charms, tied in haste. For in the glow of the hearth, the unseen world always lurks nearby. By midnight, the fire dwindles to embers, but no one moves quickly to leave. The warmth, the stories, the fellowship, all are treasures in a world of cold and toil. Tomorrow, the mud will return, the chores will pile high, and the air will reek once more of smoke and dung. But tonight, around the hearth, the village is rich in ways parchment cannot capture. In Dark Age, Britain, there are no stages, no theatres, no written plays. The hearth is your stage, your cinema, your cathedral of stories. And here, under its flickering light, you find what every age longs for: the comfort of laughter, the sting of fear, the solace of company. You wake to damp wool clinging to your skin, to the sound of rain dripping steadily through thatch, and to the knowledge that the sky itself has declared war upon you. In Dark Age, Britain weather is not a backdrop. It is a character fierce and fickle, as present in your life as kin or cattle. Rain is the most relentless of foes. It does not fall gently, but drives sideways, stinging cheeks and soaking cloaks until they smell like swamps. Fields drown huts, sag, and children cough in chorus. Sometimes the downpour lasts for days, until mud swallows boots and animals alike. Yet without rain, there is no harvest. You curse it and praise it in the same breath, a love-hate devotion forced by necessity. Wind is another torment. It moans through cracks in walls, pries at roofs like greedy fingers, and seeps into bones no matter how many cloaks you wear. It rattles shutters at night until you wonder if spirits are clawing at your hall. Some call it Woden's breath, others say it carries the voices of the restless dead. Either way, you bow your head when it rises, for defiance is useless. Snow is the cruelest guest. It falls soft and silent, painting the fields white, but beneath its beauty lies hunger. Livestock grow thin fires, devour precious fuel, and paths vanish under drifts. For 3 moments, you may marvel at the brightness of it all. Then you remember your belly and shiver at the thought of weeks with little food. Snow is not a gift, it is a reckoning. Even summer cannot be trusted. It appears late, sulks early, and never lingers long. When the sun shines, villagers pour into the fields, working with frantic joy, as though grasping a fleeting miracle. But more often than not, summer brings storms instead of warmth. Crops rot, hay spoils, and people mutter that the sky has betrayed them again. To read the weather is to read survival. You watch birds noting when they vanish before storms. You study the twitching of cows, the way dogs whine, the way smoke refuses to rise straight. Each is an omen, a whisper of what is to come. Elders claim to hear rain in their bones, and more often than not, they are right. Prayers are offered with equal desperation. Crosses are traced against the clouds. Pagan charms are hung on doorframes. Ash is scattered on fields to coax the sun. The priest preaches trust in God. The healer mutters to the moon. Both are invited for, in the face of weather, no help is too strange to ignore. And still there are moments when the sky softens. A spring morning when dew sparkles on the grass and lambs stumble after their mothers. An autumn dusk when the horizon glows red as embers and smoke from the hearth curls sweetly upward. For those fleeting hours, the world feels merciful. You savour them, storing their memory like grain against the long famine of storms. In Dark Age Britain, the weather is not something you endure. It is something you battle, negotiate and appease. And though you never truly win, each day survived feels like a victory carved against the sky itself. In the world you inhabit, love is a luxury too fragile to anchor survival. Marriage is not spun from romance, but woven from necessity. Threads of land, livestock, and labour tied together to bind families into something sturdier than passion. Your own union is no exception. The match was made, quickly decided by fathers over mugs of ale and by mothers counting goats. The ceremony was modest, performed by a weary priest whose Latin words few understood. A crowd of kin and neighbours gathered not to bless passion, but to witness an alliance. Vows were exchanged, rings, if you were fortunate, livestock, if you were practical. Then the bride was led to her husband's hut, where more eyes waited to confirm the union in ways less poetic. Yet in time, something like affection may grow. Shared laughter over a cooking pot, the relief of another back to share the burden of firewood, the comfort of a hand offered when illness strikes. It is not the stuff of ballads, but in your world, such small mercies are treasures. Privacy is rare. Your hut, now doubled in population, resounds with the coughs of children, the snores of kin, the bleating of animals tucked indoors on cold nights. The wedding bed is shared with draughts, fleas, and the constant chatter of life. Passion, when it comes, must squeeze itself into these crowded moments. Children are both joy and necessity. They arrive often, not all surviving, but each a promise that your line may endure. Some are strong, some fragile. You hold them fiercely, for you know too well how quickly the earth reclaims them. You teach them early how to fetch water, how to tend animals, how to endure. Childhood is brief, for survival has no patience for innocence. Death is never far. A woman may not live long past her childbearing years, worn by labour and loss. A man may vanish to sickness, war, or accident. When a spouse dies, grief is folded swiftly into pragmatism. Widows remarry, widowers seek new wives. The hearth cannot grow cold, and the fields will not wait for morning. Still, within these hard edges, moments of tenderness exist. A husband brings home a rare honeycomb. A wife stitches a patch into a tunic with more care than necessity demands. A glance exchanged across the hearth at the end of a long day carries as much weight as any poem. In Dark Age, Britain, marriage is not romance as future ages will dream it. It is alliance, survival, and the weaving of two lives into one against the hunger of the world. Yet within its plain and practical fabric, threads of love still glimmer, small, fragile, but enduring. You dream sometimes of dying gently, an old body curled by the hearth, eyes closing, to the sound of children's laughter, a belly warm with stew. But dreams are fragile in Dark Age Britain, and death prefers harsher entries. For most, the end comes suddenly without ceremony. A cough that will not leave a wound that festers a fever that boils the body from within. The healer is summoned, smearing herbs and muttering charms, but more often than not, her hands cannot turn the tide. She tells you it is God's will, and you nod, though in truth it feels more like the earth reclaiming what it lent. Plague drifts into villages like a whisper unseen until it lays half a household low. Famine sharpens faces into skulls long before the grave is dug. War tramples fields and huts alike, dragging death behind it with as little care as a farmer dragging dung. You may never lift a sword yet, war will find you not as glory, but as fire consuming your stores. Even kings cannot escape. They choke on fish bones, fall from towers, or die poisoned by kin, eager for thrones. Death spares no crown, no cloak, no cross. The bards may gild their endings telling tales of valour, but you know the truth, most deaths are muddy, painful, and unremarkable. Yet ritual persists. The dead are washed carefully, their hair combed, their bodies wrapped. Candles flicker beside them, prayers rise like smoke. Neighbours gather not only to mourn, but to witness, for a death must be shared to be real. The body is carried to the churchyard, lowered into earth, and covered with soil that has cradled countless others. A wooden cross is planted, though weather will gnaw it away within years. Children ask what becomes of the soul. The priest speaks of heaven angels, eternal life. The elder mutters of spirits wandering fields of ancestors, watching from trees of voices in the wind. You listen to both, unsure which is true, unwilling to discard either. For in the silence after burial, when owls cry and the air grows heavy, both heaven and haunting feel equally near. Still you live each day because you must. You rise from damp blankets, you trudge through mud, you laugh at gossip, you save a stew. Even knowing death waits patient and certain. That perhaps is its greatest cruelty and its greatest gift. The reminder that each breath is borrowed and each moment precious. In dark age, Britain death is not distant. It sits at the table, sleeps in the hut, walks in the fields. And yet, life persists, ragged, stubborn, luminous, because it must. When the day's labour finally loosens its grip, night descends like a heavy woolen cloak. Darkness here is not gentle. It is thick, absolute, pressing close against the wooden walls of your hall. Without fire, the world vanishes. With it, shadows stretch long and strange, as if spirits crowd near to watch you sleep. The hearth is banked carefully. Embers glow red beneath the ash. For if the fire dies, you will wake with frost stiffening your breath and ice glazing the rafters. Everyone huddles close, parents, children, cousins, sometimes even a goat or pig. The air grows thick with breath and smoke, the smell of sweat and wool weaving together into the common perfume of survival. Privacy is a dream for nobles. For you, sleep is a communal act, a tangle of limbs beneath coarse blankets. The noises of the night are endless. Mice scurry in the thatch above, scratching like tiny scribes recording your dreams. Dogs bark at unseen shapes, owls call their cries echoing like omens. And from time to time, wolves howl beyond the fields, a sound that stirs both fear and a strange reverence. For in that long mournful note, you hear the untamed world that lies just beyond your fragile firelight. Dreams are your only escape. They lift you from mud and hunger into realms where the sky is always blue, where feasts are endless, where you wear shoes without holes and cloaks without lice. Sometimes you dream of saints with shining eyes, sometimes of ancestors whispering advice, sometimes of monsters that chase you into waking. Dreams carry weight here. They are not mere phantoms of sleep, but messages, omens, warnings. A dream of fire might foretell disaster. A dream of water could mean abundance. Every morning, dreams are shared like gossip, interpreted with the same gravity as the priest's sermons. Sleep itself is fragile. You curl tight to stay warm, shifting when dampness seeps in from the floor. The baby wails, someone coughs. A sibling snores like a wounded ox. Still exhaustion drags you under again and again. When you wake before dawn, stiff and sore, you know you have survived another night. That is victory enough. Yet there is comfort too. The warmth of another body near yours, the steady rhythm of breath, the soft glow of embers painting the rafters orange. For all its hardships, the night binds you to your kin more tightly than the day ever does. In the darkness, you are not alone. In Dark Age, Britain night is both enemy and ally cold, uncertain, filled with whispers of spirits and beasts. But it is also the cradle of dreams, the hidden well from which you draw the strength to rise again when dawn returns. The day begins and ends with food, or more often with the absence of it. Hunger is a familiar companion as constant as mud. To eat is not to indulge, but to endure each meal a small defiance against famine. Breakfast, if it exists, is a thin porridge called pottage. It is made of barley oats or whatever grain could be spared, boiled into a grey paste. Sometimes onions or cabbage are thrown in, lending it the dignity of flavour. On rare mornings, a scrap of bacon simmers in the pot, its scent enough to make neighbours peer through the smoke as if salvation were cooking. More often, the pot bubbles with moss beans or roots dug hastily from the earth. Bread, too, is never absent, though it is coarse, heavy and black with rye or barley. It tastes of grit for stones slip into the flour during grinding. Children break their teeth on it, but bread fills the belly even when it wounds the mouth. Fresh loaves are rare. Most are days old, cut into hard slices called trenchers. These serve as plates during meals, soaking up broth and grease before being eaten or thrown to dogs if too sodden. Meat is a festival, not a daily rite. Pigs and cows are too precious alive to be slaughtered often. Chickens lay eggs, goats give milk, sheep give wool, so they are kept until famine or feast demands sacrifice. When an animal is killed, every piece is used. Flesh, roasted bones, boiled fat, rendered for cooking or candles. Nothing is wasted, for waste is death. Fish slip more often into peasant pots, though even rivers and ponds may be claimed by a lord. To cast a net without permission is to gamble with punishment. Yet hunger often dares the risk. Eels, carp and herring sometimes appear smoked or salted if fortune smiles. On fasting days, when the church forbids meat fish, becomes salvation, though not all agree on what counts as fish. Beavers with their flat tails are sometimes declared acceptable, and barnacle geese are said to grow from driftwood like fruit of the sea. Spices are rumours, treasures whispered about but never tasted. A pinch of pepper could buy a cow. Cinnamon, cloves, saffron. These exist only in the dreams of nobles. For peasants, seasoning means garlic, onions and leeks. Still, a sprig of parsley or dill plucked from a garden can make a meal feel like wealth. At a noble's feast, however, food becomes theatre. Peacocks roasted and redressed in feathers, pies hiding doves that burst forth when cut sauces heavy with sugar and spice. To dine there is to enter a different world where taste is less about hunger and more about status. Every dish proclaims power, every bite declares wealth. But for you, food is simpler, humbler, more precious. A bowl of stew shared among family. A heel of bread passed to a child. A cup of small ale brewed from barley and herbs. It is not grandeur, but it is survival. You savour each bite, not because it is fine, but because it means another day lived. In Dark Age Britain, the table is not a place of abundance. It is a battlefield where hunger and hope wrestle daily. To eat is victory, however small. And when the pot is empty, you whisper a prayer, not of thanks for fullness, but of courage for tomorrow. If bread is the body of survival, ale is its lifeblood. In Dark Age, Britain, no drink is more common, more trusted, more woven into the rhythm of each day than this cloudy, frothy brew. Water is treacherous, drawn from streams that carry filth or wells that hide sickness. Ale boiled and brewed is safer, and so even children drink it from the cradle. For peasants, it is small ale thin, weak, scarcely stronger than water brewed in the hearth corner by women who stir the mash with practiced rhythm. A jug is set on the table at dawn, passed from hand to hand, through chores carried into fields and finished at dusk. It quenches thirst, fills the belly, and dulls the ache of endless labour. Its taste is earthy, sour, sometimes sharp with herbs thrown in for flavour. Bogged myrtle, yarrow, or heather, whatever the land will give. Brewing is women's work, and with it comes power. An alewife who masters her craft may feed her family not only with drink, but with coin selling surplus to neighbours or at market. Her sign is simple, a broomstick hung outside her door to announce a fresh batch. Villagers gather eagerly, not only to buy, but to gossip, to trade, to share news. In a world where parchment is rare, the ale pot becomes the printing press of rumour. Nobles too drink ale, though theirs is richer, darker, stronger. At feasts it pours from silver pitchers into goblets while minstrels sing and dancers whirl. Imported wines arrive as well sweet from France, deep from Spain, but even in great halls, ale remains the staple. To refuse a cup is to insult your host, to mark yourself as prideful, perhaps even suspicious. Alehouses, simple huts with benches and barrels, dot villages and towns. They are more than taverns, they are community halls. Here men strike bargains, arrange marriages, quarrel over debts. Here laughter rises, songs swell, and sometimes fists fly when ale loosens tongues too far. Laws exist to keep order. Ale conners appointed by lords taste the brew to ensure it is strong enough, fair enough, honest enough. A weak ale is a crime punishable as surely as theft. Drunkenness, however, draws sermons. Priests thunder that ale is a devil's trick, that it leads to sin, to fights, to shame. Plays mock the drunkard wives, scold husbands, and yet the brewing continues, the mugs clink. The songs rise again each night. For who can live in mud and hunger without some comfort in a cup? Even children sip from small mugs, their lips frothing with foam, their laughter brighter for it. For them, ale is not vice, but nourishment safer than water, sweeter than despair. And so it flows dawn to dusk, hearth to hall, humble to noble. In Dark Age, Britain ale is more than drink. It is survival, communion, and comfort. It binds neighbours, seals bargains, soothes grief, and sweetens joy. With every cup raised, you remind yourself life may be bitter, but it can still be shared. When you look back, if such a thing as looking back is possible in a world without calendars, you see not triumphs of splendour, but triumphs of endurance. Life in Dark Age. Britain is not measured in victories carved into stone, but in the stubborn refusal to let the earth swallow you whole. You think of the meal's porridge so thin, it trembled like sorrow bread black with rye stew flavoured with roots and hope. You remember the feasts of nobles, peacocks, pies, honeyed wine that seemed like visions from another world, shimmering and distant. Yet both peasant bowl and noble platter tell the same truth: hunger is the master of the age and food is its weapon and shield. You think of faith prayers rising in smoke-filled chapels, monks bending over parchment by candlelight, charms tied to oak branches, whispers offered to rivers, saints and spirits, Christ and ancestors all jostling together in the crowded hut of belief. Faith was not pure, not consistent, but it was necessary. To believe was to resist despair, to insist that someone or something might listen. You think of labour dung shovelled in steaming heaps fields, scratched raw by wooden ploughs. Bodies bent until spines groaned like old timber. You recall the healer with her herbs, the alewife with her broom sign, the blacksmith hammering sparks into stubborn iron. Work was never ending, yet in its rhythm lay meaning. Each task said, we will live another day. You think of fear, the whisper of Vikings on the wind, the silence of forests at night, the weight of weather pressing from the sky. Death lurked in plague and famine, in childbirth, in war. It was not distant but intimate, sitting at every table, sleeping in every bed. And yet life sang louder. Children laughed, couples wed, stories spun firelight into gold. The legacy of this age is not castles or crowns, though both existed. It is survival itself, the stubborn pulse that carried people through hunger-filled storms and swords. The memory of mud, of bread, of smoke and sweat has shaped all that came after. Without it, there would be no kingdoms, no cathedrals, no written histories. And so 4 centuries vanish like mist, yet their echo lingers. In the bread you eat today, you taste their black loaves. In the beer you sip, you drink their ale. In the words you read, you hold what they could not. Their lives, harsh and humble, built the ground on which all later ages would stand. In Dark Age, Britain glory was rare, but survival was constant, and sometimes to endure is the greatest story of all.